talk about Harbortown.
Let's talk about Uptown.
Well, you're right. You can't talk about Harbortown without Uptown, and Uptown without Harbortown. But
Uptown derived from Harbortown. We did Harbortown to establish a population in downtown, residential population in downtown Memphis. We started that we laid the cornerstone in 1989.
You know, people think of Mud Island today and don't realize why it was even called that. Back then, it used to be that the Corps of Engineers would blow up the sediment that was forming Mud Island. And they thought, we've got to eliminate this. So they would basically destroy it every year. And they thought, well, you know, maybe instead of destroying it every year, we ought to just let it go. And so for decades, they did that and let it build up. But, you know, part of it was zoned for industrial, part of it was an airport. And as those properties sort of converted and became available, it was Henry's vision to really create a neo-traditional city.
Harbortown is probably, in my opinion, the most beautiful community in the region. It's an urbanist community that he had the vision to help bring to fruition, where he had the vision to partner with Maria Cole to build the Maria Montessori School. So both of our children went to Montessori School on the island from age 2 through 8th grade. So we've basically between Uptown and Harbortown built our lives around that.
Our customers there, people who bought the houses, kept coming up and they'd say essentially the same thing. Oh, you're Henry Turley. We love Harbortown. We knew we'd have a nice house and a pretty river view, but it's so much better than that. And what they were talking about is community. We'd sort of built it so it would become a friendly, good community. But they would end with, we love it and it's better than we thought. And I just thought one time, and this was provoked years before in my mind by my friend A.W. Willis, who always told me, don't just build for the rich people, build for everybody. And about 10 years later, called 1999, we had thought it up and pretty well done it, and I was looking for work. You know, what the hell was I going to do next? And I was sort of set up to do a fairly big project. Anyway, I began to wonder, could we go across the Wolf River and build and make it better than they ever thought? Could we do the same thing at a different scale? And so I called Dexter Muller, who is the head of land use
Office of Planning and Development, right?
OPD,
Yeah.
Office of Planning and Development. Yeah. And say, Dexter, we've got an opportunity to do something exceptional because of the income we've generated, in the hemispheres and all that crap. He said, Henry, I have been longing for someone to call me and say what you just said.
About that time, I had a good friend that I'd gone to graduate school with in Florida. And he said, well, in Florida, we use tax increment financing. And so I looked at the legislation and in Florida, and we literally just took the legislation, changed the name from Florida to Tennessee, took it to the State General Assembly and got it approved. But then coming back to the city council and the county commission, because we had to have it approved there too. And frankly, I didn't have the clout to get it done. I mean, I was the planning director, but Henry was the one that had experience in downtown. People had seen what he was done. They knew had done. They knew his commitment to Memphis and to downtown.
So we had to go to the county and the city to get approved. So of course I started at the county because, Harrington, the city mayor, he's a winner. He gets to keep the county's taxes.
Right.
Jim Rout Takes a little talking to, because his core constituency were the developers and the engineers and the infrastructure that's moving the city eastwardly.
Which I don't know if people can appreciate how much momentum there was going east during this era of Memphis. That's just where you built.
That's where you did it.
That was it.
And the whole developmental infrastructure was committed to that. And I remember very well, the development group, led really by an engineer, Sam Reeves, said, we've got to get a mayor. I think this Commissioner Jim Rout would make a good mayor. Got behind it. He becomes mayor. He engages Tom Jones as sort of his one-man think tank. So Rout and Jones and I would sit in the office, and I would make the case for, hey, yes, we are helping these jurisdictions in the Far East, but in the meantime, we're losing value in the city, and unless you do this, you're gonna look bad in history. If on the other hand you do it, you're kind of heroic. You know, I told you I talked to him recently. He called me about WKNO. He wanted support for WKNO. I said, hell, I couldn't say no to you, Jim Rout. Said you took kind of a heroic stand for me. We went downstairs to the commissioners, got all the votes. Went over to City Hall. Willie said, you mean I'm going to get to keep the county money? Yep. And invested in a black neighborhood, I could look pretty good. And they say, if you can get your council to support it, and they all did. So whatever they are, we got all the votes on both sides of Main Street.
One of the things I really remember, and this is probably one of the, you mentioned Henry's, this being high on this list of accomplishments, was the creation of the CRA, Community Development Agency, and establishing the TIF, the Uptown TIF. I tell people it was an ingenious idea. And I say that because TIFs have been around for a while, so he certainly didn't come up with a new concept. But what Henry had the foresight and vision to recognize is that it's challenging to do a TIF district in a low-income neighborhood by itself. So when he was working on CRA, working with Dexter Muller and others around creating the TIF, he realized that, you know what, we need to include Mud Island. So that created this huge increment that Henry, and working with the Bell's Enterprises, was able to utilize to really facilitate Uptown being redeveloped and to provide a lot of funding for infrastructure that the city was ordinarily not going to invest, at least not at that same magnitude. It was just, again, ingenious to think about it like that. And I've been involved with several TIF districts since then, and people always say, we want a TIF like Uptown. I said, you can't have a TIF like Uptown. Uptown was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity that we were able to take advantage of, and the rest of these TIFs struggle because they don't have that catalyst or that catalytic investment because it's so hard to do. But again, Henry's foresight and vision to incorporate and include Mud Island in the TIF was just, was a stroke of genius.
And then, oh Lord, we got to build, we got to do this thing. And while we're doing the politics, I'm also walking through North Memphis.
Greenlaw.
It's abandoned, Greenlaw, and that whole abandoned area.
You're walking through where Hurt Village was, and people are going, Henry, are you okay?
I realize wait a minute.
Do you need a ride?
Wait a minute. Yeah, people, when I told them I went up there, they worried about my welfare.
Right.
But of course, I had a whole project in mind. You know, I'd kind of built my career on this project.
But as I said, when I got here, Hurt Village was across the street. And let me tell you, it was so bad. It, honest to God, was. This house had been vacant for 13 years. When I first met my husband, and he would come to visit me, there was so much shooting going on. He would jump. He didn't know what to do because he wasn't used to that. And he would look at me, and it never bothered me. But see, I worked in that environment, and he didn't. And I remember my son told him one day, he said, "Pa," he said, "don't, as long as they're shooting," he said, don't worry about that." He said, "What you need to worry about is when they stop shooting." And I was like, good point, yeah.
You know, St. Jude was already here, but St. Louis really wanted to recruit St. Jude. And so there was an effort for the city to say, look, Danny Thomas started here, we'll do better. Because the neighborhoods that were to the north of St. Jude were very deteriorated. There was a lot of crime. It wasn't good even for the residents that stayed there. And there were a lot of people that had paid off their home over the decades, and they didn't want to move. They wanted to stay there.
But I think the 80s was in other words, they start tearing down houses. Now, true enough, our house is 100 years old. John's house is probably almost that old, Tari's house, and house in between. You know, but then, you know, it's just kind of a give and take situation. You know, sometimes you lose in order to gain.
When I first came in, the people who lived in all of Uptown generally thought I was gonna run them off and try to find some young, rich people to move in here. And of course, that was the exact opposite of what we wanted to do. We wanted to make it a nice area for those who lived here and people who have similar backgrounds and income levels. So I thought, I know what I'll do. I'll go to this thing on Poplar called SOS, Service Over Self, and ask them if they won't go to a specific house, I think it was on Looney, that, you know, the single man, old, lived in it. And I said, you know, if we can fix his house, let's see what we want to do. Let's see where we want to spend our money. And that changed the attitude of the community because everybody began to talk about it. And of course, now we've done many that way.
Oh, my Lord.
Yeah. But it gave me a lot of satisfaction to have done that.
But that would have started, the whole thing started kind of late 90s. And then
It really got started about 2000.
2000.
Things in place.
You've got McCrary, Faxon, Gillis.
To do about 50 homes each. And we knew we could help them sell them.
And I know, didn't Andre Jones, who's building in Uptown now, did he come through Faxon?
Sure did.
Jerry
Glad
Gillis?
you reminded me. I said, oh, by the way, I not only want you to build in this crummy neighborhood, I want you to select a black partner and help him know the business. And Andre Jones is who Jerry Gillis of Faxon Gillis found.
As part of the Uptown revitalization, we were selected as one of the 3 home builders to build the market rate housing here for the revitalization project. You know, I think we started working in 2000, and we built homes until around 2008 for the partnership. And from that point forward, we started building houses on our own here in Uptown. Rosalind Willis, who worked for Lauderdale Greenlaw, which was part of the Bells Turley partnership, and Faxon Gillis, a home builder, Jerry Gillis, took us under his wing, and we were able to help him build the homes at the demonstration block on 5th and Mill. Moving forward, after we completed the demonstration block, we started building market rate single family homes here in Uptown. In 2008, we built a home here in Uptown, and we've lived here ever since, 17 years. Raised a family here, family of 4, and it's been a wonderful experience.
I mean, what's your name in Uptown? What's your moniker?
The mayor of Uptown.
Right.
Yes. Even Mayor Paul Young and all of the previous mayors, they respect that title. Early 2000, I worked at the Cooper Young Development Corporation, and the executive director said, let's take a field trip to Uptown. And I was like, yay. So we came to Uptown, and I looked at all of the pretty houses. They were just beautiful. And I said, oh, I wish I could live in one of these houses. And he said, you can. They're affordable houses. I'm like, really? And he said, yes. No lie. I went home. I lived in South Memphis at the time. I went home and told my 82-year-old neighbor that I was moving to Uptown. And at the time, she was like, just wait till I die. Please don't leave me. She died about 1.5 years later. And I immediately moved to Uptown. And I moved to the Metropolitan Apartments until I was credit worthy to purchase a home. But in the meantime, they were having community meetings in Uptown. And I attended a meeting at the Greenlaw Community Center. And Henry was there. And I found out after the meeting, Alexandra Mobley, who used to work with us, she said, Henry asked, who is that black woman asking all of those questions? And I asked, why was that white guy doing it at our meeting? So that was our first introduction to each other. And then, we had some more meetings. We got to know each other. And he hired me to be the Uptown neighborhood coordinator. When I woke up every morning, of course, I had a job description, make sure the neighborhood is safe, free of blight, crime, engage the residents, work with the community partners, St. Jude, CRA. But when I woke up every morning, the first thing that I thought, I can't let this neighborhood go back to Hurt Village. So how do you do that? And what does it look like? And what I did, I compared Uptown to Harbortown. So if blight and crime were not allowed in Harbortown, they were not going to be allowed in Uptown. And so that's what I did. I would ride around the neighborhood, look at the houses that were blighted, and I would start working with code enforcement. That's not an overnight deal. You have to call once a week and say, hey, code, you remember I asked about this blighted property? I would work with the police department about some suspicious activities. I would host the Uptown Joint Agency meeting, which that meeting is still going on 20 years later, and it's one of the best joint agency meetings in Memphis. And that meeting is police, code, residents, St. Jude Varsity, Henry Turley Company, just stakeholders in the neighborhood, and we get together once a month to talk about things that negatively affect our community. I was the neighborhood coordinator in Uptown. I made a name for myself, and people respect the work that I do because I do it from here.
We're here on the grounds of the Greenlaw Community Center, and I mentioned before that we had asked for community policing, and our 2 police officers who were assigned to this neighborhood and were told, we want you to know the neighborhood, know the people, be able to tell the good guys from the bad guys, and in that way be personally involved in deterring crime. And so they were here at the community center. While visiting them, we saw that the park commission was having a little budget shortfall, and we weren't getting the athletic activities that we would like to have. I learned there was something called MAM, Memphis Athletic Ministries, headquartered down in South Memphis on Alsea Road. I went down there and said, "Can you come to Greenlaw? We're making a very special effort to make that neighborhood better and make it special." And of course, they told me no, their commitment was to South Memphis. And so it took a little persuasion to get them to come up here, which they did with enthusiasm. And I'll always appreciate Memphis Athletic Ministries coming up and helping us get get the young people in the neighborhood coming to the community center again. Just one block over, we had a building that was not being used. The University of Tennessee started creating health hubs, neighborhood places where you could access health care or at least learn, do eat this, don't eat that, so on and so forth, and get checks on your blood pressure, your blood sugar, important place in this state, a factor in this neighborhood. When they come, we said, "Look, we'll let you have it for nothing." They said, "Well, we don't have a capital budget to get it started, and that'll be $250,000." Oh, ouch! But we did that too, and Jim Bailey, Dr. Jim Bailey, who runs that program, came to my house Monday morning, and we talked about the future of the idea of community-based health care and how informing residents or informing people about their health helped a tremendous amount. If they know what to do and what not to do, it's just it helps a lot. We made some plans for the future, and Jim's just a nice doctor, really committed to the idea of neighborhood-based health care. So those are three things that we did, kind of a soft part of rebuilding a neighborhood and rebuilding a community. At one point, banks were being penalized for some of the mortgage practices they had had. One of the ways they were asked to compensate for it is in terms of beautifying certain neighborhoods. Well, we had a good story at this neighborhood, and if you look closely at Roxy's, you'll see that there's a rather complex and good mural on the side of it. And one of our, not a Memphis bank, but a bank from out of town paid for that to add something back to a neighborhood that might have hurt a little bit with their practices before. And then right down the street is Bridges, and Bridges intended to bridge white children and black children and provide a bridge for them to get together. That I'm convinced a lot of success is based on luck. And that Jim, if my phone ring one day, "Henry, this is Jim Boyd. We want to move Bridges into Uptown." Nothing. I don't believe you said that. I don't believe what I just heard. I'm going to hang up and call you back just to make sure. I did, he did, and you see him there, and that's we were there earlier this week talking about plans for this year. So they're a tremendous help for us, and so fortunate to have them.
Uptown would not be all that it is had it not been for investment of faith like communities. Actually, Oasis of Hope was developed about 22 years ago when Dr. Eli Morris and Ken Bennett and Howard Eddings were asked to look around Memphis and see where we could plant our flag and be there for a generation. And the North Memphis Uptown was selected. And that's what we did. We planted our flag here, began to cultivate relationships to decide if we were going to be in education, employment, housing, and ended up being sort of amalgamation of all of it as you were trying to just meet the needs in the neighborhood. In the early days, Oasis was pretty much focusing on aid, and about halfway through its tenure started focusing on empowerment. So yes, you still aid people with financial literacy, reading, education, etc. But then you start talking about how do you empower people, and this when the housing piece came into being. And Terry Hoff did a phenomenal job helping to do those kinds of things in the North Memphis Uptown area. I will say it was catalytic. It was catalytic that development was already happening. And so it was an easy investment for us to follow those who had already pioneered investment. And of course, Mr. Henry Turley was a pioneer in that respect.
The 400 units at Lauderdale Courts is vacant, and they're making movies about how bad
Hurt Village.
Hurt Village is.
Sure.
So but we got to get that fixed before we do our neighborhood. Do the single family home part, and which is the majority of the neighborhood. So I go out to Adams Street to the Memphis Housing Authority and walk upstairs to the second floor where I find one Robert Lipscomb with a leather briefcase in his hand. He has just been appointed director of
Memphis
the
Housing Authority.
Housing Authority, and he puts down his briefcase, and I tell him what I got in mind. He said, "Look at this letter I found in my inbox." He's just walking in, there's papers in his inbox. And it describes what we now call Hope 6. And that's exciting because it's what what I was proposing. We're going to have to do this together. So
I feel like we should explain what Hope 6, was aiming to do, which was take this, dilapidated public housing where you concentrated poor people in, these places that were unlivable and make nice places to live that were what they call mixed.
They called it mixing,
which is kind of industry speaks.
But ours really was.
But the idea was
because at the same time we were building the houses which qualified, for families that qualified for Hope 6 public housing subsidy, we were building houses for market.
Well, there was also this idea of home ownership, affordable housing that you could own versus rent.
When was it that you originally came over and looked at the houses when you were
2005.
20 years ago?
20 years ago, and I moved into I never will forget, the leasing office was downstairs. And I would go, it's like, okay, am I ready to look at houses? I said, no, you're not ready yet. About the third time after I worked on my issues, Lottie said, are you ready to go look at houses? I'm like, yes. And it took me one day to find the house that I wanted. I moved to Uptown under the Hope 6 program. I received a grant to purchase my home, and it's forgivable after 10 years. When Uptown started, it was Hope 6. I was Hope 6, public housing, and market rate. So in the area that I live in, I had 3 public housing residents and maybe 3 market rate, but we were all neighbors. I mean, we all learned from each other. The thing that I'm most proud about is public housing residents. You know, they had a little reservations because this was new to them. They have a house now versus living in Hurt Village. So community engagement events, you know, they were like, is this for us? I'm like, yeah, this is for us. We're all in this together. And I have a neighbor now that's public housing resident. She is unofficial neighborhood watch. Like I'm unofficial mayor, she's unofficial neighborhood watch. And that's good. We need neighbors watching out for each other.
And the other thing that was somewhat revolutionary as it relates to Hope 6 was the whole notion of scattered site housing. Because historically, and again, I'm sure there were some examples across the country, but generally speaking, certainly not in Memphis, the Hope 6 developments that were done prior to that were based on the single public housing site. It was basically demolish that existing building and build a new development. So Uptown created 2 different scenarios. One, Uptown Square, which of course was not demolished. It was a historic site due to Elvis Presley living there, and one of the reasons. Plus, it was built in, I think, 1930, so it just qualified for history, and the design certainly had its own historical merits. But utilizing historic tax credits and retaining an existing public housing site, but making it a market-based, market-driven development or mixed-income development. And then the whole notion of single-family scattered site rental housing. I forgot the total amount, but I think it was at least 100 rental housing units that were built throughout the neighborhood. So that had, I won't say never been done, but that was somewhat new and revolutionary in the Hope 6 world, because again, it typically focused on that one public housing site. So we had Hurt Village was redeveloped, totally torn down, and it was intermingled with some single family rental. We didn't just replace the public housing that was there. Greenlaw Place, of course, was on a totally vacant piece of land. It was not public housing. And as I said earlier, Uptown Square was the historic renovation.
The beauty of the whole redevelopment of Uptown that Henry Turley did that I love was the fact that you can't tell the rental property from the homeowners because they're intermatched. The homes they put in were beautiful. Some of them were Memphis housing at the time, and you can't tell. You can't tell me. You can look at a house and tell that it's a piece of rental property. You can't. So I thought I liked that idea, melding the neighborhood together. And so nobody feels like up here or down. Everybody is, you know.
What they call it, mixed development.
Yeah.
And it worked.
And it worked.
And it
I
worked.
liked it. We could find houses similar to this in other parts of the city, but nothing like this. And it was just a huge difference. And all of that, what we have here, is because of the people who invested time. Mm-hmm. You know, it took money. It took somebody having a passion for doing this, to create this. I think your dad wants you over here in this neighborhood since your street is up there. And I said, I think that's a sign we need to be over here.
Yeah.
I actually met Henry through my father, who was involved with real estate development and had a mortgage company, real estate development company, and real estate, really a diversified real estate company, similar to Henry Turley Company, but on a different scale. Most of our work was in the core inner city. But it's interesting when I think about the relationship with Henry, it's really, I'm in the middle between, I think my dad served, in fact, Henry said this, as a mentor to Henry, particularly as it relates to Henry's interest in doing some inner city and urban redevelopment work, which led him obviously to Uptown. And he's about 15 years older than Henry, and I'm about 15 years younger than Henry. So there's some interesting symmetry in terms of my life as relates to my dad, Henry, and me. And of course, I've certainly looked up to Henry as a mentor to me and many of the things that I've been involved with. So a great history there, a lot of involvement with Greenlaw and then Uptown over the years. And actually, my sister Rosalind was in the construction business back in the 80s, and her office was on North 3rd, which again was Greenlaw. and she actually did the construction work on the duplex that I renovated. It was 3 duplexes literally in a row between 3rd and 4th. And then, full circle, she worked with Henry when Uptown was really getting going. And I, of course, worked with Henry in Uptown. We worked on all the financial modeling and tax credit consulting and communication between the lenders, the investors, and HUD for Uptown Square, the Metropolitan, and Greenlaw Place. So we were very, very much involved with the redevelopment of Uptown as it evolved. All those things just created a very dynamic environment, a dynamic development that we have not seen anywhere else. And it really took a visionary like Henry to see what was possible. And he obviously had good partners in terms of the Bells organization. They generally, from my perspective, I don't know all the ins and outs, seem to provide some of the financial support, which is real interesting given today's climate around the whole notion of equity, and saying that just because this neighborhood is comprised of primarily lower income residents doesn't mean it can't be a nice, thriving neighborhood. And all the things that were done from a housing standpoint led up to that effort.
I would say that Uptown epitomizes an article that was written by Dr. Bob Lupton in Atlanta. He wrote an article called Gentrification with Justice, that you may or may not be familiar with. And I see Uptown as gentrification with justice. And that is being able to change the landscape of a community, but to do it in an equitable way where people from all walks of life can have safe and affordable housing. I think much of the gentrification that's happened around the country has left out the middle income sector and sort of suburbanized them and pushed them out. That has not been the case here in Uptown. And so I really think that that can be a model. I've seen the projects in Chicago, DC, Philadelphia, Boston. I mean, I've seen them all, but they do not have mixed income housing. And it was not intentional from the beginning. And I think here it was intentional from the beginning. And I think it was apropos, given Memphis and given our poverty rate that's sort of been entrenched. It was apropos for that to be a way to address that entrenched poverty, but also make sure that it is not suburbanized, the poverty. And so I think Uptown has been sort of a model and a scale for how that can actually be done without losing its original character. And we should trumpet it. Blow the horn.
Right. So since I moved in 2005, it was just apartments and houses. We have the Matter Trolley Barn, had St. Jude, but now we have amenities. We've had a coffee shop. We have Groovy Gratitude, fresh juice. We have a flower shop. I mean, we can walk and get a bouquet of flowers. We have daycares. We have a breakfast place. Varsity Spirits have moved into the neighborhood and has claimed Uptown as their own. We have Soul and Spirits, Grind City, Bearwater Park, Greenways, Billy Orgle's Place. We have Conwood. We have the Kent, a very well-known entertainment place. Uptown is a part of the city, and I forgot to mention, we have a Chick-fil-A. So I already knew I made the right decision by moving into Uptown, but I think Chick-fil-A sealed it. It's like, oh, okay, you're good. Well, I take that back. I thought I made it when when Chick-fil-A came, but when St. Jude put their daycare in the neighborhood, that said a lot. That said, we trust this neighborhood with our most precious assets, our children.
It has really, really, really gotten better. People over here now, you see people coming, trying to look, wanting to see, look, I need to be in there. This is an area that I'd like to be in.
We have had a great time here. It's walkable. It's close to the river, close to other amenities. And we also had the good fortune of being near Harbortown, which is one of, I think, Henry's greatest accomplishments here, the new urbanist community.
St. Jude has grown, I don't know how much in terms of square footage since Uptown was envisioned and the first, those 3 apartments completed.
The change is 180 degrees.
Uptown, it reminds me of New Orleans. I've always wanted more of the New Orleans vibe over here, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, it reminds me of New Orleans over here. So it's beautiful. And I think, Henry, it's a beautiful neighborhood.
Yeah, they did
It's
a
not
good job.
perfect.
I mean,
It's
yeah,
not perfect,
yeah.
but it's beautiful. It is. I couldn't beat the neighbors. I love the neighbors. I like them. I love them a lot. They're here, and it feels good, sitting on the porch. How you doing, Larry? How you doing over here? Everybody speaks to everybody. We watch out for everything. We watch out for each other. It's like if we're going somewhere and we don't see any of the neighbors, at home, and if D'Amica's at home down the street or Carlos is next door, watch out for us. But they will. And they'll call us, and we keep check on every little thing. Any riffraff that we have never seen before walk through here, somebody's watching them. And that's how we do. We cook for each other when you're sick, give gifts to children, that live across the street from me. He loves his little kids over there. They live in the White House on the corner. He gives them fruit for every birthday. They get some fruit. I like at night over here, late at night sometimes when I look out the window and I hear the little horses. And they're coming down here and with the little lights all over the buggy. I love it, and that's a beautiful little thing.
At the end of the day, you go over there, just go to Uptown now. Just go over there, see how it looks. You should have seen it before. I'm old enough.
Something I've always treasured.
You should have seen it before.
When I started Uptown, you couldn't leave anything outside. You could, if you had a flower pot on your porch, you just couldn't do that.
Yeah.
And now I always enjoy looking at the porch furniture and whatnot that's there now. That didn't happen.
There's no other example in Memphis like Uptown. It leveraged a lot of resources. The TIF district, the Hope 6 funds, capital funds from the city, capital funds from MHA, CDBG funds. It was just a great mixture of funding. Obviously, it's kind of complicated and challenging to make the capital stack work because all these different funding sources had their own set of rules and regulations, FHA as well. But when you think about the leverage it created, it was dramatic.
A lot of success is just luck, and I've had some pretty good luck over the years. That's all I know.